Hi, everybody. I'm not sure if this is working or not. I was so excited that I got on. Okay, okay. I think that's working. Um, I was I was able to set this up and then actually go to the page and make it happen, but it was my computer. Hi, I can't start this without some sort of technology, something. I thought maybe today would be different. And here comes my cat to share the Facebook Live with us. Come on. She had a hard time getting up here because she's getting old like me. And like Lawrence, who would have been 67 today. I was thinking about that, how he really didn't like getting older. And so he's probably thrilled dancing in the stars with the stars. So, anyway, back up. I'm Dr. Patti Ashley, and I'm here today for Shameless Facebook Friday Live, um, talking about my book, Letters to Freedom From Fear to Love to Grace, a memoir of grief and relationship. So today would have been Lawrence Freedom's 67th birthday. And 2 years ago, on his 65th birthday, Rebecca Folsom and I put on a big event at Collision Brewery in Longmont. And we sang, and it was super fun. And my publisher really put a rush on getting the book finished by his birthday. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about that night and about the book and about grief today, because I know there's a lot of grief going on with this pandemic, with this collective grief, with, unfortunately, the actual deaths that have occurred, and the loss that people are facing as a result of the pandemic. And then, grief is also things like losing our job, losing relationships, losing connections. And so, on many levels, this collective grief has been activated this past year. So, I know it's been rough for everybody. I don't think any of us are exempt from the grief that's going on. And so I wanted to talk about my journey with grief, and also, and I wrote this book in the hopes it would help people um, navigate grief, because I don't think that our culture really gives us space, container, the emotional literacy really to language and express grief. Because honestly, grief is nonverbal. Our feelings and our right brain emotion is sensory. It isn't verbal, and it isn't linear. But we focus more on our left brain, our logic, which is, putting structure and organization to things and making sense out of things in order to help us feel emotionally safe. Because the truth is, when we're in grief, we don't feel emotionally safe. We feel vulnerable. We feel afraid of always being alone. We feel afraid of our own mortality. We feel afraid of losing again and again. And it sets up a response in our nervous system of there's danger and I need to do something about it. And so one of the ways we try and do something about it is try and fix it. We numb out with our addictive behaviors, or we, stay busy, which is also an addictive behavior. Um, and people try and fix it. One of the things I write about in the book is there was a woman, um, I well, with the pandemic not so much, but um, my love is to go take dance classes at the gym. And I was in class, and it was a week or two after Lawrence died, and she was like, I want to give you some rescue remedy. And I thought, don't try and rescue me from this experience. If I'm still feeling it years from now, then yeah, I think that's a problem, even though I think we still feel it. Like, today is his birthday. He's been gone 4 years. I'm not in acute grief. I'm, I experience it as honoring the love that I have for this man by honoring his birthday and remembering him, and, you know, doing things that are special for him. You know, which is very different from, let's not talk about it. Let's move on. Let's rescue remedy. Let's get through this. And I think the that's where I'm finding people get the most stuck. And so in my work, I always say, where's the grief? Where's the grief when I'm working with somebody? Because I think, as one of the chapters in my book is all depression is unresolved grief, which I would change the word now to unexpressed grief, but because I'm not sure we ever really resolve it. There's something about that word. Actually, Lawrence and I used to fight about that all the time, resolving versus integrating. But anyway, I just want to say, let me know if you're here. I hope there's people out there watching either now or later, because I'm hoping that this will really, touch some hearts today. Um, because I think that grief is such a vulnerable, fragile experience, as is loving as deeply as I loved Lawrence. A lot of people will withhold love because of the fear of the ending. And in my book, I wrote about losing my dad. And actually, I think what I'll do is I might just actually read some from the book. Um, and by the way, okay, let's just start here. The cover of the book. This is a Native American wedding vase. And so at the very beginning of the book, Nancy Cleary, my publisher, White McKinsey, explained why this is on the front of the book. She is an amazing graphic designer, don't you think? I mean, this is a beautiful cover. I haven't talked much about the cover either. In my, it's interesting. It's been 2 years since the book came out, and I feel like it's timeless in terms of its value for people. So hopefully, just speaking to it today is going to um, give you a little bit more than maybe I've said before. So I'll read what she wrote about the wedding vase here. Well, what I wrote, but what she published in the book. On one of our dates to a Native American powwow in Denver, Lawrence wanted to buy me a gift. I suggested that we buy something for us instead of me. He agreed, and as we looked around at quilts, dream catchers, and other possible items we could share as a couple, I spotted a handmade wedding vase made of clay. Lawrence hadn't asked me to marry him yet, but the vase still felt right for us. He bought the vase, and we happily brought it home to sit upon the mantel. I sometimes imagined how we might actually use the vase one day in our wedding ceremony. In Native American tradition, one spout of the vessel represents the husband and the other represents the wife. The looped handle represents the unity of marriage, and the space created within the loop represents the circle of life. In the wedding ceremony, the groom offers the bride the vessel and she sips from one side. The bride then turns the vase clockwise and the groom sips from the same side. Then they each drink from the opposite side and then both drink from it together. If the couple can do this, then they will have a strong marriage. My guess is we probably couldn't have done that. I don't even know how anybody does that, right? I mean, that's intense. And I have to say, Lawrence and I both aren't the most coordinated people. So, anyway, so I write about this in the book, and then I also write about how, let me see if I can find it. I decided to send it to his nephew after he died because his nephew got married. His nephew got engaged when we were on a trip together in um, in LA, and it was shortly before Lawrence had asked me to marry him, and so I got to meet his family. And here it is, the chapter on the wedding vase. So what I did was write this. Since Lawrence and I never got to our wedding ceremony, the vase was not and the vase was not put to use the way I had imagined it might be. After he died, I wondered what to do with it. I knew it would always be a reminder of our marriage of sorts, but I also knew that it might not be appropriate for me to hold on to as my life has to move on eventually. So I thought of John and Vanessa. They were married on April 8th, 2017, the day before what would have been Lawrence's 63rd birthday. Actually, I forgot that. So yesterday would have been their anniversary. 4 years. Happy anniversary, John and Vanessa. Um, I wasn't able to make the trip to Brazil to attend the wedding, but I wanted to get them a gift. As I was thinking about what I might choose to send them, the wedding vase came to mind. I felt a bit conflicted as I really didn't want to give it away, but on the other hand, it seemed so perfect for them. I wanted John and Vanessa to have this precious vase that represented how much Lawrence loved me as a way to acknowledge how precious their marriage is and how much they both meant to Lawrence. When mailed the package to Brazil, I had never mailed anything out of the country before, and I had to fill out customs paperwork and declare a value on the item. And the postal worker told me it would take 3 to 4 weeks to get there, and the postage was quite expensive. I was a bit concerned that it might never make it to John and Vanessa, which would bring great sadness to me, yet somehow I knew it was the right thing to do. And I also sensed that Lawrence would keep an eye on it to be sure it arrived. That was another huge piece of letting go. Even though I knew it was the right thing to do, I experienced more grief as I said goodbye to that memory and the item that represented our marriage. Vanessa sent me this message after the vase arrived. Thanks a lot for the beautiful vase. You won't believe me, but when we were in Colorado, we almost bought one to bring home, but we didn't because we could not put more weight in our suitcases. Guess you guessed it. Thanks a lot. It means a lot to us, and I can say why Lawrence would like to give it to us too. So beautiful and with such special meaning. Thanks and lots of love, John and Van. Um, so that's the wedding base on the cover, and I really haven't talked much about that. It's interesting that yesterday was their anniversary, and they're in Brazil, and I know the coronavirus is pretty bad down there, so I haven't really talked to them, and I hope that they are well and staying well. Um, yeah, so hope there's people out there. Nobody's saying anything. Say hello if you're there. Um, and yeah, so the book, let's talk about the title, Letters to Freedom. People think it's about writing letters to him after he died, which I think is a great exercise. Um, and I actually am writing letters now to my dad because I'm feeling like part of this grief is really deeper layers always of more grief. And the reason I wrote this book is because I lost my father when I was 11 years old to a sudden heart attack, and then Lawrence died the exact same way, um, 40 some years later. And I thought I had learned about grief and knew a lot about grief and was determined to go through grief um, in the most organic uh, way possible, knowing what I know, which is you have to tell the story at least 100 times. That all feelings are meant to be felt, and paying attention to the grief. So, so the book isn't about letters that I wrote after he died, even though, again, I think that's a really good idea. And I decided to circle back around it and write some letters to my dad recently, as I'm noticing in this pandemic and being home a lot, there's still more layers. So, what it really is about is at the end of our relationship, um, 3 months before he died, we had decided to take a little break because of several reasons. I mean, we were very deeply in love with each other, and we were, moving in the direction of getting married, and yet there was a feeling that I had that he had some unexpressed grief around his wife who had died a few years before, and also, wondering if that it might be helpful for him to have a little bit of time, so that I didn't feel like I was filling in that space, which also was a lot of my own avoidance, having been single, and again, my story having been losing my father and really being afraid to step fully into loving someone. Like I said earlier, I mean, it tends to be a thing, right? We're afraid to love because losing hurts like hell. It breaks our heart open to something bigger, which is what I write about in the book, and which is what he wrote about in his from fear to love to grace. So towards the end of that 3 months, we had been in contact a little bit, and we had scheduled a date, and we were going to see, what it would be like to move back into relationship together. But the last couple weeks before he died and before the end of that 3 months, I was feeling a lot of fear that we weren't going to be able to reconcile and make the relationship work. And when I think about Lawrence and what I know about him and how devoted he was, you know, he would not he would have definitely moved back into fully being committed to our relationship. So it didn't feel like a rational fear. It felt really odd. So I started the book with the very first letter that the last letter that I wrote of 7 letters, um, uh, because it really speaks to that fear that I didn't think that he was going to move back into a relationship with me that didn't seem rational. And so I think I wrote this letter actually when he may have been dying, because we found out the next day when his friend found him after he'd missed an appointment, around the time when I was writing this piece. So, letter number 7, November 13th, 2016, watching the Broncos without you. Dearest Lawrence, last night I remembered the moment I asked my father not to go to work. The unspoken tension in the house that day was extra heavy. I was only 11. Please don't go to work tomorrow, I whispered. The next day, my sister found him gasping for his last breath on the living room floor. He'd been scraping the ice and snow off his car trying to get to work that day. I can still see Daddy and me face to face in the same spot of the house where he once got out his belt to spank me, even though he never ever hit me. Instead, he put the belt away. He was a gentle soul and could do no harm. I was lucky to have a father like that, especially compared to some of my friends' dads who were often angry and sometimes abusive. Not my dad. I'm so worried you might not want to be in a relationship with me anymore. I wonder why I'm so anxious. Is it the little girl who asked Daddy not to go to work and he did anyway and then he died? I had a father who loved me more than life itself, and in an instant he was gone. You promised to never leave me, and yet today I'm so afraid you are gone. I love you more than words can say, and I'm counting the days until I see you again. Always, your ladybug. So I was putting the letters that I was writing into a box that I had actually covered with some art stuff, collage box that I'd made with my friend Billy Ortiz. Um, and I was folding up this letter, putting it in the box when I got the phone call from Jim. And, that's, I think, the first chapter says, no, actually, no, because the first part, okay. So then I divided the book into fear and love and grace. So the first part of the book is about my dad. I mean, he was super cool. I love that man. Here's a picture of my parents and me and my baptism, and how much my mom had this love story about my dad. She was super romantic, and he came back from World War II and said the army doesn't want me to you. And so the first part was really about that, and how hard it was that morning that he died. And then the second part is really about our relationship. Um, and in each part, I took a quote from Marianne Williamson's book, and I want to read those because I really like what she says. But so the first part is fear, and it kind of relates to what I was saying a minute ago about how sometimes we're afraid to step into love uh, because we're afraid to lose. So she says, I warn you, this will not be easy. I warn you, this will take some work. I warn you, love will burn you up. Are you ready to be burned, or would you rather just grow old? So that's part 1, fear. And then part 2 is love. And I take this other quote from her book, Enchanted Love, that says, at the heart of love lies an irreducible mystery. To demystify love is to lose it. Its mystery provides its vital power to enchant us, to touch us, and to heal us. And so part two is amazing. That's the fun part, right? Those are all of our stories. We traveled a lot. We did a lot of fun things together. And then the third part is grace. So Lawrence was working on a curriculum called From Fear to Love to Grace. And after having lost his wife, he felt like um, yeah, his heart broke open. And so I write about that in the book too. Um, break my heart open to a higher love. And as I was saying earlier, this is our fear of loving that deeply, is the pain of breaking our hearts. Hi Trisha, hi Billy. Oh Billy, I'm so glad you're here. I was mentioning our little box. So I don't know if you heard me say that or not, but I was talking about the box that we made. So, which is in this chapter, I believe, part 3, Grace. So Marianne Williamson's quote from Enchanted Love is, "The enchanted issue is not whether our bodies stay together or not, but whether hearts and minds are reconciled." So this part is really, and here's the part about the phone call that I was saying that happened after the letter. I wrote the letter, put it in the box that I had made with my sweet friend Billy Sherrill. We believe it was the day he died, and we were out looking at the big moon, which I may have written about in here too. Pretty sure I did. But this chapter, first chapter in Grace, is called The Phone Call. So the night before I learned that Lawrence had died, I finished painting the box for his letters. My friend Billy was sleeping over after a long night of doing art together. We built a fire. Well, here it is. We built a fire in the backyard and sat under the huge, bright November supermoon. I felt a calm presence, as if Lawrence was there with me in my heart. I hoped he would still choose to be with me, but somehow I felt he was gone. The next morning, we watched a clip from Saturday Night Live. Kate McKinnon, in character as Hillary Clinton, sang Hallelujah in honor of Leonard Cohen's passing and Hillary's lost election. After watching the video, Billy and I continued to sing the song Hallelujah for a long time, and we commented on how we just couldn't get the song out of our heads. Billy left. I turned on the Broncos game and finished letter number 7. 2 hours later, I got the call from Lawrence's friend Jim telling me he had found Lawrence dead on the living room floor. So, yeah, these things in our lives that happen, that how do we find the meaning? And I think that's what the grace part is about for me. And that's why I'm doing this today. I mean, this feels so vulnerable. This feels always I don't know, scary as much as, why the hell am I doing this? And yet I feel like the story that happened with Lawrence was so profound, that I want to share it with people in hopes that we can understand. And again, come back around to what I was saying at the beginning of understanding, grief, as Billy, shared with me, Martine Prechtel's quote about grief and praise. It's that's how we love. When we're grieving, we're actually praising the person who's gone, because that's how deeply we love, and we can't have one without the other. And again, I think the sadness that I feel so often with people is, I had a new client this week who, really close friend, suicided at the age of 40 something. No indication that this was going to happen. And it happened in February. And she was saying that, yeah, they're already feeling this sense of, well, people don't really want to talk about it anymore. It's been a couple months. We need to move on. And I think this is the biggest problem right now in our culture, is not having a space to tell the story at least 100 times. And so writing this book for me gave me an opportunity to tell the story, and not feel like I was a burden to people, and crying, but I spent a lot of nights crying at my computer. And again, Lawrence died over 4 years ago, and I'm not in acute grief anymore. And so now I feel like it's time to really continue to share this story in hopes that people can um, find safe witnesses, containers, ways to express grief, because it is praise, as Martine Prechtel says. We really are honoring, and today is Lawrence's birthday, so I really want to honor, that he would have been 67 today. And I think I said at the very beginning, he hated the aging process and growing older, so he's probably really happy that he's not in a body anymore. Gotta laugh. I mean, we like to laugh, so why not? Um, anyway, yeah, so that's Letters to Freedom. 2 years ago, Billy was also real helpful in the book party that we did with Rebecca Folsom, which was super fun. I sang the song Back of My Heart, which was one of our favorite songs, and Rebecca helped me do that, which was really brave, something that I've always been wanting to do, um, since what I write about in the book is Sister Claire and guitar lessons in the church folk group after my father died was a really helpful healing piece. And music is so healing. Anything that we can do that activates our right brain is important for healing, because again, that's where the feelings are. And grief, as I said earlier, isn't verbal, it's nonverbal, it's nonlinear. And if we can embrace both and grief and praise, that's how we move through grief, and that's how we get to the other side. So music is very healing. Anything creative that we can do, writing, music, um, dance, art, anything that we do to express our grief is helpful. So that's why I wrote the book. And that's my hope, again, is that it will help people, because again, it was extremely vulnerable to put this personal story on Amazon.com and to be here on Facebook today. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything else. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts, or uh, you know their experience of grief and what that means to them? I know we have a couple people watching, but I'd love to hear you chime in. I know Trisha and Billy are here. um, Anybody want to share about grief, or a thought or question? Okay. Well, thanks for being here. And you can get the book on Amazon.com. You can also go to my website, pattiashley.com, and there's a link there for it as well. And yeah, happy birthday, Lawrence. And my heart goes out to anyone in grief right now. And know that all feelings are meant to be felt, and we have to go through it to get to the other side. And so my hope is that you have enlightened witnesses in your life, people that can hold you in the space of grief, and this too shall pass. All right, take care, everybody.